Today is February 5th, I believe. March 5th, 2020. And things have definitely changed since the last time I spoke with you all. I have not been engaging in reading the book because I've had some life-changing, life-altering situations pop up in my life unexpectedly. But I do want to read some So let's see here. I believe I left off in this area right here. I may end up reading something over again, but at least I know if I overlapped, I covered it. I'm going to go to page 19 of Born in Captivity, A Psychopathology as a Legacy of Slavery by Dr. Rick Wallace. There's a caption from Frederick Douglass that says, "Where there is no struggle, there is no progress." I'm at the bottom of page 19. Based on the complex nature of overlapping social paradigms, the presence of certain ontological ambiguities presented epistemological challenges that had to be worked out as data was collected and analyzed. The uniqueness of the African American experience also impacted epistemology. Burrell, 2010, Odson and Fishbein, 2010, DeGruy, 2005. Additionally, this same complex construct required that I adopt an investigative approach that embraced the principles of functionalism in certain aspects of the research and interpretivism in others. Over the past 40 years, there has been a well-documented dilemma that has expressed itself along social, cultural, economic, and political lines. The plight of African Americans has been cataloged in explicit detail. When it comes to the financial and economic challenges that plague the Black collective, Dr. Claude Anderson has contributed a couple of volumes that illuminate various enigmatic difficulties that plague the Black community. According to Dr. Anderson, on the eve of the Civil War, quasi-free Blacks owned less than 1/2% of the aggregated wealth in the United States, and 155 years later, Blacks still own less than 1% of the wealth in the United States. In his book, Black Labor, White Wealth, Dr. Anderson goes into an in-depth explanation of what transpired over the course of the 150 years since the emancipation of Black slaves in the United States. While there have been external forces that have contributed to the economic castration of Blacks in America, the question remains as to whether Blacks have exhibited a certain level of complicity in the perpetuation of their economic woes. One of the alleged culprits of supposed self-inflicted economic castration in the Black community is the strong proclivity of Blacks to practice consumerism beyond its means. According to a written and published work by Timba Muhammad of the NOI Research Group, I'm guessing that's the Nation of Islam, not only has consumerism played an immense role in the progression of the economic impotence of the Black collective in America, but the natural inclination of Blacks to engage in consumerism at an exorbitant level can be traced back to slavery. What makes consumerism so important when evaluating the enigmatic dilemma that Blacks are facing in the United States is the fact that consumerism is one of the primary streams of revenue that supports the development and sustainment of the white, wealthy elite in America. With the natural hostility that exists between the white and black races, consumerism plays a major role in sustaining the significant economic advantage that whites have over blacks in this country. The wealth gap is important because the wealth provides the power and influence that is consistently used to emasculate any attempts of blacks to elevate themselves, subsequently leading to the conclusion that by participating in consumerism, blacks are, in essence, financing their own demise. It is the point of this work to not only present evidence that blacks are complicit in their economic castration through consumerism and a number of other fallible financial practices, including failure to invest, the failure to build an organized group economic infrastructure, and the failure to practice group economics, but also to present pragmatic and empirical evidence that a substantial portion of the behavior associated with these erroneous and unsound practices can be attributed to cognitive distortions that have served to develop faulty paradigms that guide the decisions and behaviors of blacks in all 9 areas of human activity: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. The cultural dilemmas that plague the black community are multitudinous and stem from a form of psychological fragmentation and individualism that facilitates a level of acrimony, disruptiveness, and divisiveness. The schismatic factions that exist within the black community are increasing at an exponential rate. Walter Williams, a professor of economics at George Mason University, presents his thesis on the black dilemma in short form, presenting a hypothesis that attributes the problems of the black collective to culture more than racism. One area in black culture that Williams highlights is the disintegration of the black family nucleus, with only 25% of black children being raised in a 2-parent household. This particular statistic is immensely relevant when considering the existing data that is available, confirming that growing up without both parents places youth at a significant disadvantage to those who have both parents in the home. According to a study conducted by the University of Wisconsin and the University of Ohio, on average, children who grow up spending some or all of their time away from one of their parents are worse off in the areas of personal development, social mobility, and pro-social behavior than children who are raised with both parents in the home. There is substantial evidence that certain external forces that serve as major contributors to the breakdown of the black family, such as complicity through the proclivity to use peripheral route engagement instead of central route engagement in evaluating the validity of information that will help form central cultural paradigms by blacks is at the core of this complex dynamic that has resulted in the devastation of the black family. When reason and logic are given a platform in this discussion, it begs for an explanation of how a group of people would logically place themselves in a vulnerable position that further exacerbates their struggle and disturbs their effort to gain equal footing in the American economic, social, and political climate. However, it will take the combination of inductive and deductive reasoning and development on a scientific plane in order to effectively decipher the code that dictates the mobility or the lack thereof of African Americans. When it comes to developing a lucid and expanded perspicacity of the influence of the breakdown in the African American family structure, it will be necessary to evaluate the empirical measurement of the impact of single-parent homes in the African American collective, a number that has tripled since 1960. Walter Williams asserts that while the absence of the father created a social enigma that extends beyond the lack of income that he contributed to the home, the economic impact of his absence cannot be ignored. Williams further asserts that the weakened black family has given rise to several enigmatic issues that include higher crime rates, predation, and numerous other forms of antisocial behavior. However, Stevens and Joy DeGruy insist that positive racial socialization, and attention to the perception of being disrespected by African American male adolescents is key to reducing the proclivity for violence of young African American males between the age of 14 and 30. A close examination and an atomization of the condition and behavior of blacks present a lucid portrait of a dichotomy in which blacks are negatively impacted by systematic racism through a multiplicity of pernicious machinations, as well as blacks being willful participants in their own destruction through behavior that defies common logic. Based on the basic concepts of cognitive theory, poor decisions and poor behavior are commonly the results of cognitive distortions, cognitive biases, and cognitive variations that serve to warp the perceptive reality of the individual or group in question, contributing to what can be reasonably considered poor and irrational behavior. Cognitive distortions, in whatever way they present themselves, are simply the manifestation of exaggerated and irrational thoughts. According to Aaron T. Beck, negative thoughts that have been generated by dysfunctional beliefs can have far-reaching consequences, including depression, irrational decision-making, and poor behavior. While depression is not the core theme of my research and its dissemination, it must be given a substantial amount of consideration when examining the possibility that cognitive distortions play a role in the compliance and participation of African Americans in a system that has been historically hostile toward them. According to Beck, there is a direct correlation between the maladaptive, faulty, or irrational and exaggerated cognitions, because depression can also have an immense impact on human thought processes. Its impact on the cognitive development of African Americans must be considered. According to Hara Ashraf Morano, PhD, the average human can have from 25,000 to 50,000 thoughts during a single day, and there are innumerable factors that can impact those thoughts. Depression is one of the influencing factors that can dictate the direction of mental cognitions. One of the dynamic elements of depression is the proclivity to produce pessimistic and cynical thinking. Depression speaks through the negative thoughts, subsequently fueling negative behavior. In fact, depression manifests itself in negative thinking before it produces negative effects. Understanding the measurable impact that depression has on thought processes and the direct correlation between thought and behavior, depression must be considered when evaluating the behavior of blacks on a collective level. To further elucidate this point, we will need to evaluate the concept of post-traumatic slave syndrome as presented by Dr. Joy DeGruy. So I'm going to take a break, and I just want to apply what I've just read to my own life. So I am the product of a single parent home. My parents separated and divorced when I was 11. And my mother, and I quote, hid me from my father from the ages of 11 to, I want to say, 13, which had a big impact on me. Even though at the age of 13, my mother began to allow my father to come around, he was not present enough in my life or spent enough time with me to make a positive impact on me. My mother was the negative one. My mother was full of negativity and depression, and as far back as I can remember, she would always tell me that I can't go outside and play, I'm gonna break my bones, I can't do this, I can't do that. Whatever it was, if it was something positive, it was always, you can't. And so I just want to be transparent and open about my experience and how this book applies